The prison ship *Retribution* floated like a dark metal mountain in the emptiness of space. It sat in the shadow of a dead star, where no light could reach it. The ship's outer walls were covered in scratches and burn marks from prisoners who had tried to break out over the years. Most had failed. Those who succeeded never made it far. Deep inside the ship, in the most dangerous part where only the worst criminals were kept, something terrible waited behind glowing purple walls of energy. The walls hummed with power, creating 3 separate barriers that no living thing had ever broken through. At least, not yet. Draktor sat perfectly still in his cell. He had not moved for hours. He had not spoken a single word for 4 to 7 long days. The alien was huge, almost 9 feet tall when he stood up. His skin looked like black stone, covered in scales that seemed to absorb light. His eyes burned like golden fire in the darkness of his cell. When he breathed, which he did very slowly, small wisps of smoke came from his nose. His people, the Draknari, were famous across the galaxy for being fierce fighters who never gave up. But even other Draknari were afraid of Draktor. The last time he had tried to escape, 6 prison guards died. He had torn through them like they were made of paper. After that, the prison guards started calling him the dragon behind his back. Nobody wanted to get close to his cell anymore. Warden Hayes was a tired man with gray hair who had run this prison for 12 years. He sat in his office, drinking cold coffee and looking at reports on his computer screen. The intercom on his desk crackled to life. "Sir, we have new prisoners coming in today," said Officer Kim from the control room. Hayes pressed a button and spoke into the device. "New transfers coming in on Shuttle Bay 3. Standard protocols in effect." Down in the guard station, Captain Rodriguez looked at the work schedule for the day. He was a big man with dark hair and scars on his hands from years of dealing with dangerous prisoners. When he saw who was supposed to feed the prisoners in Sector 7, he made an unhappy face. "Thompson, you're on prisoner meal duty for Sector 7, he called out to a young guard who was checking his equipment. Thompson was new to the prison. He had only been working there for 3 weeks. His face went pale when he heard his assignment. "Sir, that's the restricted wing," Thompson said, his voice shaking a little. "Maybe we could ask someone else to do it? Someone with more experience." Rodriguez shook his head. "The dragon hasn't moved in weeks. Just slide the tray through the food slot and move on. Don't try to talk to him. Don't look at him longer than you have to. Just do your job and get out." Thompson nodded, but his hands were still shaking as he picked up the meal tray. What none of the prison workers knew was that a little girl named Casey had gotten lost that morning. She was 6 years old with brown hair tied up in 2 small ponytails. In her arms, she carried an old stuffed bear that was missing one eye. The bear had been with her since she was a baby. 3 months ago, Casey's parents had died when space pirates attacked their transport ship. The pirates wanted to steal the cargo, but they ended up killing everyone on board except for Casey, who had hidden in a supply closet. Now she was traveling to a new planet where strangers would take care of her. The prison ship was supposed to be a quick stop to drop off some prisoners and pick up supplies. Casey was supposed to stay in the safe area with the other civilians. But she was a curious little girl, and she thought she heard someone crying somewhere in the ship. That morning, the prison workers were doing regular maintenance on the ship's computer systems. For just a few minutes, some of the security doors stopped working properly. Most of the doors stayed closed, but a few opened when they shouldn't have. Casey slipped away from the group of civilians when nobody was looking. She followed a long hallway that seemed to go deeper into the ship. The walls were made of gray metal, and strange lights blinked on and off. She had never seen this part of the ship before. As she walked, she could hear a sound that made her heart hurt. It sounded like someone was very, very sad. It reminded her of how she felt when she missed her parents. Casey wanted to help whoever was making that sound, because she knew what it felt like to be alone and scared. The sound was coming from somewhere ahead, behind a wall that glowed with purple light. Casey put her small hands against the cold metal wall as she walked down the dark hallway. Her footsteps made tiny echoing sounds in the empty corridor. The lights above her head flickered on and off, making strange shadows dance on the walls. She wasn't scared, though. Casey was a brave little girl, even when she was all alone. The crying sound was getting louder. It was coming from somewhere behind a wall that glowed with bright purple light. The wall made a soft humming noise, like the sound of bees on a summer day. Casey had never seen anything like it before. She walked closer, curious about what could be making such a sad sound. "Hello?" she called out in her small voice. The word echoed in the empty hallway. "Are you sad too?" Inside the cell, Draktor had been sitting in the same position for hours. His large body was perfectly still, like a statue made of black stone. His golden eyes stared at nothing, lost in dark memories of his destroyed home world. He was thinking about all the things he had lost, all the people who would never come back. Then he heard something that made him freeze. It was a voice. A tiny, gentle voice asking if he was sad. Draktor's massive head turned slowly toward the sound. His neck made small creaking noises as he moved for the first time in days. In 3 long years of being locked up in this terrible place, no one had ever come to his cell just to talk. Guards only came to bring food or to check if he was still alive. Other prisoners were too afraid to get near him. Through the purple energy barrier, he saw the smallest human being he had ever seen in his life. It was a little girl with brown hair, no taller than his knee. She was holding a stuffed animal that looked very old and worn. The sight of her made him blink in surprise. "I'm Casey," she said, sitting down on the floor in front of his cell. She crossed her legs and made herself comfortable, as if she planned to stay for a while. "My mommy and daddy went to heaven 3 months ago, so now I have to go live with people I don't know. Are your mommy and daddy gone too?" The great warrior stared at this fearless child. Most adults ran away when they saw him. Grown soldiers with weapons and armor were afraid to look him in the eyes. But this tiny human girl just sat there, asking him about his family like they were old friends. Draktor's own children had died when the Coalition's warships attacked his home world. They had been young, not much older than this human child. He had tried to protect them, but he had failed. The memory of their voices calling for him still haunted his dreams. He had not spoken their names out loud since the day he was captured and brought to this prison. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Casey waited patiently, the way children do when they really want to know something. She looked at him with curious eyes, not afraid at all. Finally, Draktor spoke. His voice was deep and rough from not being used for so long. It sounded like thunder rolling across a distant mountain. "Draktor," he said, telling her his name. Casey tried to repeat the strange sounds, but they were hard for her small mouth to make. She scrunched up her nose and tried again. Draki? The way she said it made it sound almost friendly, like a nickname for someone she cared about. She giggled at her own attempt, and the sound was like music in the dark prison corridor. "That's really hard to say. Your name is too big for my mouth." Casey thought for a moment, tilting her head to one side the way children do when they're trying to solve a problem. Then her face lit up with an idea. "Can I call you Dad instead?" she asked, her voice full of hope. "Daddies are supposed to take care of little girls and keep them safe from scary things. And you look really strong, like you could protect anyone from anything bad." Draktor felt something strange happen inside his chest. For months, the only feeling he had known was anger. Hot, burning rage that never went away. It kept him warm in the cold cell and gave him strength when he felt weak. But now, looking at this innocent child who wanted to call him Dad, he felt something else. It was warm, but not like anger. It was gentle and soft, like sunlight after a long winter. For the first time since his capture, Draktor felt something that wasn't hatred or pain. The little girl was still looking at him, waiting for his answer with patient, hopeful eyes. "Parker. There you are." Sergeant Williams came running down the corridor, breathing hard. He had been searching for the little girl for 3 hours. The entire civilian section had been turned upside down looking for Casey. Everyone was worried sick about where she could have gone. When Williams finally found her, he couldn't believe his eyes. Casey was still sitting on the floor in front of the most dangerous prisoner's cell. She had spread out several pieces of paper around her and was holding up colorful drawings she had made with her crayons. "Look at this one," Casey was saying to the huge alien behind the energy wall. "This is you flying through the stars. And this one is us having a picnic on a planet with purple grass." Williams felt his heart stop. The little girl was talking to Draktor like he was her best friend. And even more shocking, the terrifying prisoner was actually listening to her. "This is my new dad," Casey announced proudly when she saw Williams. "He told me amazing stories about flying through space and fighting bad guys who hurt innocent people. He's really smart and knows about lots of different planets." Williams automatically reached for the weapon on his belt. Every instinct told him to grab the child and run. But then he stopped and stared in amazement. Something impossible was happening right in front of his eyes. Draktor was sitting calmly in his cell, leaning forward to get a better look at Casey's artwork. The monster who had killed 6 guards was now gently examining crayon drawings made by a 6-year-old girl. His burning golden eyes were focused on her pictures with genuine interest. "This is incredible," Williams whispered into his radio. "Sir, you're not going to believe what I'm seeing down here." Back in his office, Warden Hayes listened to William's report with growing disbelief. The most violent prisoner in the galaxy was having a peaceful conversation with a human child. It seemed impossible, but William swore it was true. Hayes decided he had to see this for himself. When he arrived at the restricted wing, he found Casey showing Dractor how to count to 10 in English. The alien was repeating the words in his deep, rumbling voice, trying to get the pronunciation right. 1, 2, 3, Casey said slowly, holding up her small fingers. 1, 2, 3, Dractor repeated, his voice gentle despite its frightening depth. Hayes watched this scene for several minutes before he could accept what he was seeing. The galaxy's most feared warrior was patiently learning basic human words from a little girl. Within a week, something remarkable had happened. Every day, Casey would visit Dractor's cell. The prison guards stopped trying to keep her away when they realized that the dangerous alien became completely calm and peaceful during her visits. When Casey wasn't there, Dractor would return to his silent, angry state. But the moment she appeared, he would transform into something almost gentle. Casey would sit for hours, teaching Dractor simple human songs. She would clap her hands and sing nursery rhymes about twinkle stars and raindrops. In return, Dractor told her stories about his home world, describing crystal forests that sang in the wind and silver rivers that flowed upward toward the sky. His deep voice painted pictures of beautiful places that existed far away among the stars. Other prisoners started to gather in the corridors nearby, but they kept a respectful distance. They were amazed to see the legendary fighter they called Deathwing sitting patiently while a human child used her finger to help him sound out words on her electronic learning tablet. "CAT spells cat," Casey would say, pointing at each letter. "Cat," Dractor would repeat carefully, his massive claws delicately touching the screen. The other prisoners whispered among themselves, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Some of them had children of their own back on their home worlds, and seeing Dractor's gentleness with Casey reminded them of what they had lost. Then one day, Casey got sick. She woke up with a high fever and couldn't get out of bed. Dr. Martinez, the prison's doctor, said she would be fine, but she needed to rest for a few days. When Casey didn't come for her daily visit, Dractor became frantic. He had grown used to seeing her bright smile and hearing her cheerful voice every day. When hours passed and she didn't appear, he started to pace in his cell like a caged animal. By the second day, Dractor's worried roars were echoing through the entire ship. The sound was so loud and full of anguish that it made the hull vibrate. Other prisoners couldn't sleep. Guards covered their ears. The terrible noise went on for hours. Finally, Dr. Martinez came to Dractor's cell to explain that Casey was sick but would recover soon. Only then did the roaring stop. The giant alien sat quietly, waiting for news about the little girl who had become the most important thing in his life. When Casey finally felt better and came to visit again, Dractor's joy was obvious to everyone. He pressed his massive hands against the energy barrier, as close to her as he could get. "He's not a monster," Casey told Warden Hayes one afternoon when he came to check on their unusual friendship. "He's just lonely like me. Everyone needs someone to care about them." Hayes looked at the two of them and realized the little girl was absolutely right. The attack came without warning in the middle of the night. It was 3:47 in the morning when the pirate ships appeared out of nowhere, their weapons already firing at the prison vessel. The Retribution shook violently as laser blasts hit its thick metal walls. Emergency lights started flashing red throughout the ship, and loud alarms began screaming in every corridor. Captain Morrison was the leader of the pirate crew. He was a dangerous man with cold eyes and scars covering his face. Someone had paid him a lot of money to break into the prison ship and rescue 3 specific prisoners from the medium security wing. He thought it would be an easy job. Get in, grab the prisoners, and get out before the coalition military could respond. But Morrison had made one big mistake. He hadn't bothered to learn about all the prisoners on the ship. He had no idea that the galaxy's most dangerous warrior was locked up in the maximum security section. The pirate ships attached themselves to the prison vessel like metal spiders. Dozens of armed pirates cut through the hull with powerful tools, creating holes they could climb through. Their plan was working perfectly. They fought their way through the ship's defenses, heading straight for their targets. "Hull breach in Section C," the ship's computer announced in a loud, mechanical voice. "All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill." Throughout the ship, prison guards grabbed their weapons and ran to defend their posts. Warden Hayes coordinated the response from the command center, trying to figure out how many pirates they were dealing with. The ship's automatic systems sealed off damaged sections and activated emergency protocols. But in all the chaos and confusion, Something terrible was happening in the civilian quarters where Casey was supposed to be safe. The pirate attack had damaged the ship's life support systems. The section where Casey was staying suddenly lost all its air. The walls cracked, and the precious oxygen that kept everyone alive started rushing out into the cold emptiness of space. Casey woke up to the sound of alarms and the feeling of being pulled toward a hole in the wall. The air was being sucked out of her room, and she couldn't breathe properly. She tried to hold onto her bed, but her small hands weren't strong enough. Terror filled her heart as she realized she was about to be pulled out into space where nothing could survive. "Help me," she screamed as loud as she could. "Somebody help me." Her voice carried through the ship's communication system, reaching every corner of the vessel. In the maximum security wing, Draktor heard that terrified scream, and his entire world changed in an instant. "Dad! Daddy, help me!" Case's voice echoed through the speakers, filled with fear and desperation. Something deep and powerful awakened inside Draktor. It was like a sleeping volcano suddenly erupting with unstoppable force. For 3 years, the energy barriers had held him prisoner, but nothing in the universe could stop him now. His little girl was in danger, and he would tear the entire ship apart to save her. The purple energy walls that had contained him for so long shattered like thin glass. The sound was like thunder as 3 layers of the most advanced prison technology ever created broke under the raw power of his fury. Metal groaned and bent as Draktor's massive body burst free from his cell. His huge claws, each one as sharp as a sword, tore through the reinforced walls of the ship like they were made of paper. Nothing could slow him down. He moved through the corridors faster than anyone thought possible for something so large, following the sound of Case's voice. Pirates who tried to stop him were thrown aside like toys. Their weapons couldn't even slow him down. One pirate fired his laser rifle directly at Draktor's chest, but the alien warrior didn't even notice. He had only one thought in his mind: reach Casey. The dragon's loose. Morrison shouted into his communication device, panic clear in his voice. "All units, forget the mission. We need to." But it was too late. Draktor was already moving through the ship like an unstoppable force of nature. He followed Case's cries through damaged corridors and broken walls, getting closer with every second. When he finally reached the civilian section, he saw the worst thing he could imagine. The outer wall of Case's room had been completely torn away. She was holding onto a broken piece of metal with both hands, her small body being pulled toward the deadly vacuum of space. Without thinking about his own safety, Draktor leaped forward. He spread his massive wings wide and wrapped them around Case's tiny form just as her grip failed and she was pulled toward the hole. His wings were strong enough to shield them both from the terrible suction of space. The ship's emergency systems finally activated, creating a force field that sealed the breach. The dangerous pull of the vacuum stopped, and Casey collapsed against Draktor's chest, shaking with fear and exhaustion. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You came for me." Draktor held her gently in his massive arms, his heart pounding with relief. "Always," he said in his deep, rumbling voice. "Family protects family, little one. I will never let anything hurt you." In that moment, surrounded by the chaos of battle, they were just a father and daughter who had found each other again. With the prison ship badly damaged and life support systems failing throughout the vessel, Draktor found himself at the most important crossroads of his life. The pirate attack had created chaos everywhere. Broken walls, sparking electrical systems, and emergency alarms filled the corridors with danger. In all this confusion, he could easily steal one of the escape pods and disappear into the vast galaxy. For 3 long years, he had dreamed of this moment. Freedom was finally within his reach. He could return to his people and continue the war against the coalition that had destroyed his home world. He could seek revenge for all the pain and suffering he had endured. The rage that had kept him alive in his cold prison cell whispered that this was his chance to make his enemies pay. But as he looked down at Casey, still trembling in his arms from that terrifying experience, Draktor realized that revenge no longer mattered to him. This little human girl had given him something he thought he had lost forever, a reason to care about tomorrow. She had called him dad when no one else in the galaxy saw anything in him except a monster. She had sat with him during his darkest hours and brought light into his world. He made his choice. He chose Casey. Instead of running away, Draktor did something that shocked everyone on the dying ship. He began helping with the rescue operations. His years as a military commander had taught him how to organize people during emergencies. He knew exactly what needed to be done to save lives. All prisoners from Section B moved to escape Pod Bay 4, his powerful voice boomed through the corridors. Guards, help evacuate the injured from the medical wing. Everyone else, gather emergency supplies and head to the main assembly point. Prison guards who had been terrified of him just hours before now found themselves following his orders. Other prisoners, seeing that even the legendary Death Wing was helping instead of escaping, decided to join the rescue effort instead of trying to break free. Draktor carried Casey on his broad shoulders as he moved through the ship, coordinating the evacuation of both prisoners and guards. His tactical knowledge helped them organize the chaos into an orderly retreat. He knew which sections of the ship were most likely to fail first, and he made sure those areas were emptied quickly. When the Coalition military ships finally arrived to help, they couldn't believe what they found. The galaxy's most wanted fugitive was calmly directing rescue operations while a small human girl sat on his shoulders, pointing out areas where people might still be trapped. Admiral Peterson was a stern woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who had been hunting Draktor for years. She appeared on the communication screen, expecting to finally capture her greatest enemy. Instead, she found him saving the lives of Coalition personnel. "I want to make a deal," Draktor announced, his golden eyes looking directly at the Admiral through the screen. Peterson's face showed her surprise and suspicion. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate, alien. You're still a wanted criminal." Draktor shifted Casey to a more comfortable position on his shoulders before responding. "I saved your people today. I saved your ship's crew when I could have left them to die. And I can give you valuable information about 17 different rebel groups that are planning attacks against Coalition targets." The Admiral's eyes widened slightly. Intelligence about rebel activities was extremely valuable to the Coalition military. But she remained cautious. "What exactly do you want in return?" Peterson asked. "I want official custody of this child," Draktor said, gently patting Casey's leg. "And I want a chance to earn my freedom through military service. I'm tired of fighting a war that only brings more death. I want to build something better instead of destroying everything I touch." Peterson studied the unlikely pair for a long moment. The most dangerous warrior in the galaxy was asking to become a father to a human child. It was perhaps the strangest request she had ever received. "The child would have to remain with you at all times," Peterson said finally. "Under guard, of course. And you would be monitored constantly." Before Draktor could respond, Casey piped up from her perch on his shoulders. "Families stick together. That's what daddies and daughters do. We don't want to be apart anyway." Peterson couldn't help but smile slightly at the child's confident declaration. "Very well. But one mistake, one sign that you're returning to your old ways, and the deal is off." "Understood," Draktor replied. "You have my word." 6 months later, something amazing had happened. Lieutenant Commander Draktor Parker reported for duty aboard the Coalition vessel New Hope Star. He wore a modified military uniform designed to fit his large frame, and official adoption papers made Casey legally his daughter. She had even taken his new human name, Casey Parker. The former terrorist had become the Coalition's most effective military strategist. His knowledge of rebel tactics and his natural leadership abilities made him invaluable in planning defensive operations. Ships under his command had the lowest casualty rates in the entire fleet. Casey had become the ship's beloved mascot. The crew adored the brave little girl who had tamed a monster with nothing but kindness and love. She attended the ship's school, played with other military children, and helped in the medical bay when injured personnel needed cheering up. In the evenings, Draktor would tell Casey stories about distant planets and ancient battles. She would draw pictures of their adventures and sing him the human songs he had learned to love. They had found something that neither of them had expected, a real family. The galaxy had learned an important lesson from their story. Sometimes the greatest strength wasn't found in destroying your enemies. True power came from protecting the people you loved, from choosing compassion over revenge, from building bridges instead of walls. The little girl who had called a monster dad, had taught everyone that family wasn't about having the same blood or coming from the same planet. Real family was about love, loyalty, and the choice to care for each other no matter what challenges came their way. And in the vast darkness of space, that love shined brighter than any star.